Like to welcome in now Marc Raimondi to talk to me about Usman and Covington 2. Soon as it's announced, Covington starts in with he's taking EPO, which to me, Mark, is like, who could be as good as Usman, right? Like, I get it. Covington's really good too, but Usman's been on quite a roll. What's your take about, first of all, the fight being made and then Covington's accusations?
Yeah, I mean, first, I think that was the fight that had to be made in the welterweight division, right, for the welterweight title. Covington is the clear number one contender. I know that Usman fought him before, and and Usman finished him in the 5th round at UFC 245 in December 2019.
Tough fight.
But
Yep.
It was a super close fight. It was basically a draw going to that 5th round. So there's no wonder why the UFC would want to run that back. UFC President Dana White, in particular. That's one of his favorite fights of all time. Usman-Covington won.
Yeah,
so
a great fight.
Not a huge surprise there, Max, that they're going to do that one again. As far as the accusations of performance-enhancing drug use by Covington, nothing new. He was saying those types of things before the first fight in 2019, and he actually even once called Kamaru Usman the CEO of EPO. So take that for what
EPO. Mark, that is true that it was a brutal fight and a close fight before Usman finished him in the last round, but Usman's gotten better since then, it seems to me. At least, and look, there's not a huge sample size. Not like they each fought 10 times since then. But Usman seems to be, look, if you ask me who's the best pound-for-pound fighter in MMA, I would say Usman at this moment. And so to me, it feels like he's put a little distance between himself and Covington. What's your thought on and I understand in MMA, everyone's a de facto kind of one-punch knockout artist, right? You can hyperextend a limb, choke an airway, knock someone out. You can do a flying knee like Sandhagen or someone like that. A million ways to win. But it does feel to me like Usman separated himself a little in the interim. Your thoughts?
Totally agree. I think that when Usman beat Covington in 2019, there were not many people at that point saying Kamaru Usman is, like you said, the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. That has changed. I mean, he's 2-0 this year alone, and he had the big win against Masvidal last July. He did even better against Masvidal the second time around. He knocked him out. Also has knocked out Gilbert Burns. And the big thing about Usman is the improvement in his striking. And
he stood up with Masvidal and flew his head.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think everyone thought if you watched the first fight against Masvidal, the game plan for Usman was clinch, takedown, clinch, takedown. The second fight, completely new guy. It looked like a new fighter. The way that he was striking, and he knocked him out in the second round. Clean one-punch knockout. We had not seen that before from Kamaru Usman. He looks like a much more dangerous guy now than he did against Covington the first time. It's hard to say where Covington is at. He's only fought that one time. He looked great against Tyron Woodley last September, but we have only seen him in that one fight since he lost to Kamaru. So it's hard to say, but certainly Usman, the perception and also, I mean, the objectivity, he is better now than he was before the first fight.
Striking is one thing, right? Like a lot of guys can strike, but can you get in with a striker who can also move their head and keep your head offline while you're exchanging? Like, do you have the muscle memory to do that? Usman does. To think that he's just going to try and take you down now would be folly. And Gilbert Burns, by the way, he doesn't lose. I mean, just beat Wonder Boy. And most people, I think, thought Wonder Boy was going to win that fight. That win looks even better, I think, today than it did. All right, so I think we can move on now. Have we covered Usman and have we done it? Have we covered Usman and Covington? Is there anything else you would like to say, Mark? Because there's so much more to get to.
I could talk about that fight all day. Usman in particular, I think he's really come into his own. I think he's really become a big star for the UFC. And if he beats Covington in November, he goes 3-0 for the year. And to me, he's the clear-cut frontrunner for Fighter of the Year. I mean, if the year ended right now, he's the guy. And if he goes and beats Colby in November, I mean, we're talking about an historic run. He's won 14 straight fights in the UFC, Max. I mean, the only man to ever win more in a row in the UFC is Anderson Silva, who's one of the greatest of all time. So
at the time was considered the greatest. Yeah, at the time, Anderson Silva was considered the greatest as a result of that run.
Great run.
But by the way, the fight I want to see, I don't care what I want to see Khabib come back, move up, him and Usman. That's the fight I want to see. Okay, that would be my favorite fight.
And actually, right now, I'm in a hotel. It's Bellator Media Day. Khabib is somewhere in this building. So if I track him down, Max, I'll pitch that idea to him.
Usman would be favored. Who else would be favored in two divisions over Khabib? I would imagine Usman would be favored, right? Bigger, stronger, better stand-up game at this point. All right, Dillashaw and Sandhagen. it was like any close decision winds up being controversial. Who won the fight in your opinion? Dillashaw got the decision, obviously. Who won the fight?
Very close fight, of course. I don't want to say the word robbery. I'm not a big fan of that word, especially in close fights like this. But I did think that Corey Sandhagen won the fight. I had him winning the second round, the fourth round, and the fifth round, which was the same scorecard that Judge Derek Cleary had. He was the lone dissenter in the split decision.
Yeah, but it was interesting to me because late in the fight, different judges scored different rounds for either fighter. It's not like certain judges saw that, so that just speaks to how close it is. And what I notice in decisions is what you look for is the fighter who won more rounds decisively. And in my view, in fact, because I also thought Sandhagen won, but in my view, there were 2 rounds that Dillashaw won. There was 1 round that Sandhagen won. Like, that's a round for Dillashaw. That's a round for Sandhagen. That's a round for Dillashaw. And then there were 2 closer rounds. So, in fact, in decisive rounds, to my eye, it looked like Dillashaw 2-1. And it was interesting because Sandhagen, he was even asked after the fight, when he kept going for the leg, right, actually did something to the leg and didn't seem to realize it and take advantage of it.
Yeah, it was kind of an uneven performance for Sandhagen, even though I thought he won because he was winning the boxing game and then he kind of got away from it. He was throwing some ill-advised spinning kicks and flashy techniques. He didn't have to do that. He had a guy on the other side of the cage that had a huge gash in between his nose and his eye. I mean, a gigantic cut, and he wasn't targeting it. And I think really, Max, what it came down to this fight was just the experience. Dillashaw is already a 2-time bantamweight champion. He's been in so many of these 5-round wars, whether it be against Dominic Cruz. You know, he had title fights against Cody Garbrandt twice, Renan Barão. The guy just has the experience. He's 35. Sandhagen has not had that yet, and I just think that the management of a 5-round, championship round type of fight, Dillashaw had the advantage, and that's why he eked it out in those late rounds.
Dillashaw, that was very impressive against Barão, but it almost, this is one of the things about combat sports. You have a flying knee and you catch an all-time great, right? Just right and knock him out real quick in the first round. Sometimes you're not doing yourself any favors. It's actually not great preparation heading into a fight with a guy like Dillashaw, who comes off the shelf 2 years for getting caught using EPO, and Sandhagen had strong comments about that. What did he say? Despicable or disgusting? I forgot what it was, but very impressive. Whether you think he won or lost, to come back against a guy as hot and as active as Sandhagen and do that, very impressive for Dillashaw. Where does he rank in the division right now? If you said, where does he rank?
I think he's right there. I think he's really right there as far as contenders go. There needs to be a rematch between champion Aljamain Sterling and challenger Peter Yan. They fought back in March, and it was a controversial finish. Yan
winning the fight and all that. Yep.
Exactly. He was winning the fight. It was DQ. Sterling ended up with the title. Just a kind of a huge mess there back in March in Vegas. So Dillashaw is, to me, he gets the winner of that fight unless he doesn't want to wait around. That fight is likely to be in October between Sterling and Yan. So I think Dillashaw is right there. And absolutely, Max, I completely agree. The guy was away for 2 years. He hurt his knee in the first round. And then he got busted wide open with that horrendous cut in the second round. Then he came back and he still managed to win the fight in 5 rounds. Very impressive.
Yeah, when Sandhagen was talking about, hey, I thought we're past just your zombie, some zombies coming at you. I forgot how he phrased it, but, used the word zombie, right? Which is, I get when people are trying, when fighters are trying to say, look, this is about skill and technique, not just about how much you can take. But in fact, if you can go zombie on a dude and take the shots and keep coming, that puts you in good stead. If you can stick around because of and get your stuff off too, you have a chance to win. And that's what happened. I guess if you say like it's an unofficial sort of tournament, right? Winner of this gets the winner for the title, and then those two will fight, right? So what's the ranking? I'm asking you, if you have to pick 1, 2, 3, 4, how does it go in the division?
I would put Dillashaw at 2 or 3. It depends on how you view Aljamain
Yan won because he was winning the fight? Yan won because he was winning the fight, or no? Because he officially lost, you have him 2?
No, that's the question, right? How would you rank Sterling? I wouldn't put him number 1. I would keep Yan there. I would say, Yan 1, Dillashaw 2, Sterling 3, because look, Jan was winning that fight. I know Sterling is the champion. I mean, there's something to be said for that, but he won it on a disqualification. I think he's a great fighter. No disrespect.
But wait a minute, you just said, Mark, that you had Sandhagen winning. So shouldn't Dillashaw be 4 in that case?
Well, okay, so if I changed my ranking after every controversial or close decision, Max, I mean, it would be like alphabet soup. I mean, it would be a complete disaster. So it's so hard to do that. And look, it was a close fight. I don't want to say it was a robbery. I thought Sandhagen won. I'm not a judge. I wasn't ringside. I wasn't there for the fight. So I have to give him the benefit of the doubt and give props to Dillashaw. You have to, right?
I agree, and I think that Dillashaw also, the inactivity aside, the reason it was such an interesting fight is you had a more active, kind of hotter fighter on a streak versus a guy who'd been on the shelf for 2 years, which is a long time away, but who seemed to have more ways to win, right? And so that now that he's got this fight out of the way and now he's active again, and it turns out to be a really good win, at least an official win, now you have a guy with more ways to win who's also not on the shelf for 2 years, who just came back against top flight opposition. And the whole thing that Sandhagen brought up about, just walking through the punishment and not reminds me of the other fight I want to talk about, which is Yanez and Costa, because that also heading in was a really interesting matchup between two good fighters. But Yanez was the hot prospect guy. And early on, it looked like a mismatch. It looked like he was getting completely undressed, but it also seemed like Yanez, like a fight like that sometimes is a more impressive showing than just a dominant win, because he showed he has more tools in the toolbox and also is not a front runner. Costa kind of folded in that fight. When Yanez was coming back and hitting him, Costa went away without the same kind of resistance that Yanez showed in that first round. That's my basic impression of the fight. I thought Yanez showed championship mettle in that fight, and Costa showed contender mettle in that fight. Your view of the fight and Yanez's future?
Love that fight so much. And to me, this is an example, Max, of why that bantamweight division in the UFC is, I think it's the best division right now in the world, because we're talking about guys who are not even ranked in the top 15, and they may not even be even super close to the top 15, at least Costa now after the loss. But these guys are extremely talented. They're on the rise. They're prospects. They're on the way up. And that division is already so deep. We were just talking about Dillashaw, Sandhagen, Jan, Sterling. I mean, that division is absolutely stacked. And I'm very high on Yanez, and I was before his fight a few months ago as well. After that one, and look, you're a much more knowledgeable guy when it comes to boxing to me. But as far as MMA boxing goes, Yanez has impressed me a ton. And his father was a boxer. I believe he was a Golden Gloves champion in Texas. He's a Houston guy, loves boxing, and I think that he can go very far in that division. And like you said, he showed not only that he has the skills and the temperament, he also has the perseverance and the heart, and he came back against Costa. I thought that fight was fantastic.
Yeah, could you imagine if Yanez was having the kind of first round that Costa was having, right? Like, he never loses that fight. It would just get worse for his opponent. But he is a multi-dimensional, at least striker on his feet right now. I was impressed. I thought he showed real, like the stuff of champions. It remains to be seen, as you said, in a very deep division, how far he gets. But he showed why he is such a hot prospect. Like his reputation, and the reputation starts in the gyms and word of mouth and stuff like that. You can see what people would see to start, not just the results in the octagon that we've all seen, but the stuff that people must be seeing behind the scenes as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And this was definitely the UFC's idea for kind of like a prospect eliminator type of fight, because both guys have big upsides. I guess they were just trying to find out who is the most ready. And look, Randy Costa is going to be a really, really good fighter, Max. He doesn't even have 10 career pro fights yet. He's still very much on the rise. In fact, it reminds me a little bit of TJ Dillashaw when he first came into the UFC. He was on The Ultimate Fighter, and he got knocked out by John Dodson. And Dodson went on to be a good fighter, not a great fighter. And Dillashaw, of course, became champion. That could be Randy Costa in a few years, coming back from that early loss and becoming a top flight, top contender, top guy.
No question. I think that you can go to school on a fight, including the difference between thinking you want it and really wanting it, right? Like, you face a guy with more resolve in that moment. You can go back to the drawing board and not just work on the tools, but also the kind of will to win in those moments and persevere. You can absolutely go to school on that and get better. And I was just intrigued by the fight, especially in that division. Marc, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much.
Well, there you have it. Look at that. Just a pleasure to talk to me. Thanks, Marc. Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.